This is the Lars Larson Show.
Welcome back to the program. It's stunning in the last few weeks, the number of high-level Democrat operatives out there. I think of John Kerry, and Adam Schiff is one of them, who've been out advocating to silence Americans and to silence alternative sources of information for those Americans, like Adam Schiff, demanding answers from social media companies about their plans to so-called address the spread of misinformation, disinformation, and potential incitement of violence on their platforms. In other words, the Democrats have finally said the quiet part out loud and said, we want to be able to censor things so we can get one line of thinking and one line of speech, and we want everything else to be silenced. At least that's the way I saw John Kerry, that gas bag who ran for president and was Secretary of State, saying, yeah, the First Amendment kind of gets in the way of us developing a narrative and developing a consensus. Why don't we silence all of those other sources of information? Rob Winterton joins me now, who's Director of Public Affairs at NetChoice. Rob, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you for having me, Lars. I appreciate it.
And if you think I'm off base in anything I just said in introducing you, feel free. I mean, correct what I've said, but and it is all coming, I think, from the Democrat side of the aisle. They're saying we can't have everybody with different stories. We've got to silence the alternative points of view or the alternative information so we can have one kind of information, which, as John Kerry suggested, would make it easier for the Democrats to govern, at least in their view.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd add to your introduction, Lars, is that actually this weekend, Hillary Clinton made your point perfectly. She said that without some sort of regulation or greater government oversight of social media, they were going to find it hard to control the narratives and control the news that Americans are consuming. And that's really the tragedy here. You know, it seems a little ridiculous on the surface of it, even funny, but underneath there's more of a sinister undertone that really matches this global crackdown on free speech that we've been having. You know, it's really important that today more than ever, Americans are really standing up for free speech, standing up for the First Amendment, and pushing back on this campaign to take away their ability to share their news and their views online.
Well, it's funny because, Rob, it reminded me when I was about 19 or 20 years old, I was working in a newsroom in a radio station, and I told my boss, who was considerably older, I said, hey, look at this. They had a plane crash in Russia and nobody died. He said, where'd you get that? I said, it says TASS. I don't know what TASS is. TASS was the big Soviet news agency. He said, don't believe anything they say. That's the government's news agency. And they'll always claim, well, there was a plane crash and nobody got hurt, nobody died, nobody even spilled a drink, you know, and all of it is just government propaganda from the Soviets back in the day. And it sounds like that Hillary and John Kerry and Adam Schiff and the rest want to go back to those days to where the government just says, yeah, don't tell people anything that we don't want them to think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from the UK, and I was really shocked and quite upset recently when they called for, or I say they, some lawmakers in the UK called for the arrest of Elon Musk because he was challenging on X the government's line around riots that they were having over there. But I also think it's important to show that this is not just, you know, a foreign thing that's happening in other countries. The call is starting to come from inside the House. I mean, we have a disinformation governance board that lies in wait to try to do something to control the way that news is spread online. We've had almost a decade of pressure on social media companies from our politicians asking them to come to heel and do what the government says they should do when it comes to speech on their platforms. And I mean, this really is just like the long maturing of what we were hearing as ridiculous ideas about free speech on college campuses 10 years ago. Well, those college graduates are now working in important jobs like in the government, and we're hearing those ideologies being spoken back to us about how, hate speech needs to be outlawed, misinformation needs to be outlawed, and that the government apparently needs to take a heavy hand with the information that we have access to. I think we really, really need to push back on this. Argue back, show that social media is the best place for people to be sharing their news and views. It's one of the freest places to do so right now. And that we need to fight to maintain that and push back against government control of the internet in this way.
I'm talking to Rob Winterton, who's from NetChoice. So one of the things that concerns me is ordinarily the news media, and I've been working in the news media for a long time. I was a reporter for a long time. And usually if City Hall or the state legislature or the White House said, you're not allowed to know that, or you're not allowed to say that, the mainstream media would push back hard and say, if you tell us not to tell people about this, we're going to tell them twice. And yet I'm seeing even in the news media, CBS just had an interview because today, October 7th, is the anniversary of the terrorist slaughter of 1,200 innocents a year ago. And apparently they had Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's this author, and he's very pro-Palestinian. Well, their reporter asked the guy a bunch of tough questions. And apparently CBS brass has already come down on this guy and saying, no, you can't ask tough questions on that subject. And so even in the private sector, there appears to be a modeling of the same kind of thinking that's going on among these politicians of saying, well, we have to control the narrative too. It should all go from here to there and don't stray off the path. And if you do, you're going to get called out for it. That's not the way the news media has traditionally operated. It's usually, no, we're going to give you whatever extremes and the middle, and we'll let the public decide what they want to think. And so there seems to be a willing acceptance of this censorship narrative. Yeah, we'll go along with it too. And when they do it, you can't haul out the First Amendment because that's only a constraint on government.
Right. I mean, I think we saw so much of this during COVID, right? We saw a lot of claims that free speech was really just another way of saying that you're causing some sort of public unhealthy situation, that you're causing harm to people. It's fundamentally just a really concerning narrative that we're seeing. I think it's good that there's a diversity of social media options out there for people to use so that they can ensure that they're getting the news and views as openly and as freely as they need. But fundamentally, there's a cultural maybe even philosophical discussion, right, about the role of speech in society where, something as important as the traditional media is really failing to be able to stand up and offer that true diversity of thought. They seem to be scared of the government. They seem to be persuaded when the government tells them, oh, don't report on that. That's a concern because of misinformation. We don't think it's true. Since when is the media so willing to listen to lawmakers about what's true when it's election time? It's really quite concerning. And, I think the main thing we really need to push for here is a better cultural understanding and support for the First Amendment and for free speech. But, it also means that we need to ensure that the government and the way that they like to overregulate things, they like to put their heavy hand on things, is kept away from social media. It's a lot of, I appreciate good concerns people have about it out there, and maybe they think the government has one role this way or one role that way. But at the end of the day, it's going to create a world, a society, an America where we have the government in greater control of what we can say online. And that's a dark, dark place we're headed if that's what happens.
Yeah, it is, because, Rob, 3 years ago, just about this time, 2021, Joe Biden got in front of cameras and microphones and said, if you get the COVID shot, you can't catch COVID. And I thought, well, that's not true. It wasn't even at that time we knew that wasn't true, but he said it anyway. And I waited for a bunch of the mainstream legacy media to say, well, the president's overstated or some other excuse for him saying something that was demonstrably false 3 years ago. And we know it's absolutely false today. You can get the shot and you can still get sick. There are plenty of people who have. And yet at the time, it never got called out. Why? As you suggested, it didn't fit the narrative, and they wanted to stick to a narrative, so they let Joe Biden say whatever he wanted. And there should have been detractors saying, I don't think that's true, and Joe Biden better back that up, or we're going to call him out as disinformation. That is Rob Winterton. Rob is Director of Public Affairs at NetChoice. Rob, thank you